Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. My name is Andrew Edmondson. I am membership manager, and I am so happy that you could be here to start off our fall 2022 exhibition series. It is going to be my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lisa Volpe, curator of the exhibition, who's going to give you an overview of the exhibition, but first wanted to give you a preview of coming attractions. If you want to immerse yourself in the historical context for this exhibition, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we are going to have a lecture given by a professor from Prairie University, Texas A&M Prairie View, and it's going to look at Stokely Carmichael as a bridge from the civil rights movement to the Black Power movement. And that lecture will be happening at 2 o'clock. It's completely free. I think it's in this room. So please join us tomorrow at 2 if you would like more information. Next weekend, the fun continues. We are giving members an early preview of our stunning exhibition, Philip Guston Now, which opened in Boston this past summer and is going to the Tate Museum in London. And as you're fans of member lectures, want to make sure that you know that next Saturday at 11:30 a.m., beloved curator Allison de Lima Green will give an introduction to the exhibition Philip Guston Now. And if you can stay with us at 3 o'clock, we're going to have a panel discussion that's going to look at how Philip Guston's work relates to the present moment. And the artist, Trenton Doyle Hancock, is going to be there, and Philip Guston's daughter, who is the president of the foundation that oversees his work and has helped to organize this exhibition. She will be there. Both lectures are absolutely free to you as members, so please join us next Saturday at 11:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. for two great deep dives into Philip Guston's work. I always love when Lisa speaks, and I love for two reasons. Her exhibitions always come at things from a unique perspective. She doesn't take the beaten path and trot it over again. She finds new and unique ways to look at the subject. For instance, everyone knows Georgia O'Keeffe is an incredible visual artist, but how many people knew that she was also a very accomplished photographer? And it was Lisa who put that exhibition together. And it was so successful that that exhibition has now gone on a national tour. It opens next at the Cincinnati Art Museum. And after the success of that exhibition, Lisa was promoted from Associate Curator of Photography to Full Curator of Photography. So her great work has obviously been recognized. What I also love about, yes, she deserves all praise and accolades. What I also love about Lisa's lectures is I'm not an art historian, and I don't always have a kind of background that's extensive in a subject. And she's able to introduce elements that bring you into the story of how she curated that exhibition. For instance, when she put together the Georgia O'Keeffe exhibition, she was almost like a private detective. She went through this process where she compiled an Excel spreadsheet of everywhere that Georgia O'Keeffe had visited, lived, or traveled for like 3 decades. And if it were a city like New York, she also had noted in there where she stayed in New York, so that that could help her verify that some of the photos in the exhibition were indeed the work of Georgia O'Keeffe, because there was a question of whether they should be attributed to Georgia O'Keeffe or another photographer, Todd Webb. So if she ever decides to abandon curating, which I hope she won't, she has a future as a private investigator. So I know she also did extensive historical research of a similar type on this exhibition, and you're going to be in for a great lecture. Please welcome Lisa Volpe.
Oh my gosh, what a great introduction. Thank you. I'm so thrilled to see you all here. Oh my goodness. Well, welcome to the museum. Welcome to Gordon Park's Stokely, Carmichael, and Black Power. The exhibition has been organized by the Museum of Fine Arts Houston in collaboration with the Gordon Parks Foundation. And I have to begin by thanking the foundation that opened its doors to me, and also everyone here at the museum, my museum family, for embracing this exhibition from its beginnings as just a little idea and helping it look so incredibly beautiful on the walls today. I must thank all of our generous funders, Ann Levy Charitable Trust, and Jean Krotkin, Dr. Ruth Simmons, Drs. Jaquine and Garfield Johnson, Simon and Gardy Bannister, Drs. Annette and Anthony Brissett, and Nicholas Stewart and Zavon Butler, Drs. Russell H. and Rosalind C. Jackson, Wendy and Mavis Kelsey, Fan and Peter Morris, Karen and Ramon Manning, and Marinda Watkins Martin and Reginald Martin. And I don't think I saw any of them in the audience today, but next time you run into them, please thank them for us again, and poke them and remind them that I owe them private tours as an open invitation. So let's begin with the exhibition. The exhibition brings you back to June 1966. The heat of the summer is matched by increasing social and political tensions and tensions between the different civil rights organizations. Still, leaders from the different organizations descended on Mississippi with plans to continue the March Against Fear after James Meredith was shot on only the second day of his planned solo march. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, CORE National Director Floyd McKissick, and SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, with its newly elected chairman, Stokely Carmichael, marched side by side. When SNCC had decided to join the other civil rights organizations on the March for Freedom, they did so with the express purpose of demonstrating their new strategy, Black Power. In fact, Carmichael, who was a dedicated SNCC member, a former freedom rider, and a skilled community organizer, was elected chair specifically to usher the group into this new era. During the march on June 16th, Carmichael took the stage in Greenwood, Mississippi, aiming to define SNCC's new approach. And with the energy of his audience reverberating below and cameras snapping, Carmichael launched the public call for Black Power. He explained, quote, "Black Power means Black people coming together to form a political force, either electing representatives or forcing their representatives to speak to their needs. It's an economic and physical bloc that can exercise its strength in the Black community instead of letting the job go to the Democratic or Republican parties." A pretty clear definition, if you ask me. But as the cry echoed through the Mississippi night and soon around the world, the phrase and its messenger became a lightning rod for controversy. Carmichael found himself in the news daily as the world discussed and dissected the term Black Power. Reading these articles now, one can recognize a blatant denial of the meaning of the term. A July 12, 1966 article in the New York Times accused Carmichael of being, quote, "willfully ambiguous in the goals of Black Power, as if the true aims were too devious to express out loud." Yet oddly, the article also summarizes Black Power pretty succinctly, saying block voting in order to achieve equality of treatment, but then rejects it entirely. If this were really what the promoters of Black Power had in mind, there wouldn't be much to quarrel about. Kind of ironic, right? Well, there really wasn't much to quarrel about, but the press found reasons anyway. Life, eager to cover Carmichael and Black Power for the magazine's readers, called upon one of their most famous photographers, Gordon Parks. Now, Parks was one of the 20th century's preeminent photographers, and his ascension began in 1941 when he won a Julius Rosenwald Fund Fellowship for his photography, which allowed him to work with Roy Stryker and the famous photographers of the FSA, the Farm Security Administration. It was a dream come true for Parks. He had admired those photographers and the images they produced when he was working as a railroad porter, and he would collect the magazines passengers left behind and study them. In his really first moments joining the FSA in Washington, D.C., he produced the image you see on the right, which is one of his most famous images, which we refer to as American Gothic, but shows Ella Watson, a cleaning woman in Washington. Remember, this is one of the first photographs he takes in Washington, if that gives you any indication of what an incredible photographer he was. Now, Parks began developing his own socially conscious practice during his time with Stryker at the FSA. Stryker stressed the importance of letting images communicate the message. This show not tell lesson was one of the first that Parks learned at the FSA, when almost immediately Stryker sent him out into Washington, D.C., go to a picture show, he said, to the department stores, eat in restaurants and drugstores. But Parks encountered prejudice at every turn. And when he returned to the office, angry and ready to reveal the racist truth of our capital city, Stryker counseled him, it's not enough to take one person's picture and label it bigot. You have to get at the source of their bigotry, and that's not easy. The camera becomes a powerful weapon when put to good use. And this story is so often repeated in Parks's texts and speeches and books. It's clear this lesson was foundational for him in learning to wield his camera as a weapon. Now, Parks created groundbreaking work not only for the Farm Security Administration and magazines such as Vogue and Life, where he was hired as the first Black photographer, but he was also a respected film director, one of the first Black directors in Hollywood, and I just wanted to take this moment to mention, in conjunction with the exhibition, we'll be screening 2 of Parks's films on original 35 millimeter, Shaft on Thursday, December 15th, and Lead Belly on Thursday, January 12th. Okay. But he was also a composer, a memoirist, a novelist, a poet, and he left behind an exceptional body of work. By 1966, Parks was no longer working for Life full-time, but he was still offered assignments by the editors. When he was offered the opportunity to profile Stokely Carmichael, he jumped at the chance and said, Stokely Carmichael, those were the assignments I wanted to do in the worst way. So Parks traveled with Carmichael on and off from the late summer, early fall of 1966 to spring 1967, capturing the activist in meetings, at lectures, giving speeches, as well as at more personal life events such as his sister Lynette's wedding. In his photographs, Parks drew on his own artistic sense, photographic compositions and broad visual motifs familiar to Life's readers, and aimed to force a recognition of Carmichael's full humanity. In his text, Parks balanced his own opinion against that of his subject, presenting a nuanced investigation of Carmichael's beliefs and his motivations. And through text and image together, Parks presented a multi-dimensional profile of Carmichael's character and of Black power, one that stood in opposition to the caricature of Carmichael popular with the press. Now, when the photo essay was published in Life in May 1967, the magazine's editors only chose 5 images to accompany Parks's text. Parks had shot more than 700. So now, more than 50 years later, a broader selection of Parks's images were made available to us at the MFAH. About 5 years ago, curator Malcolm Daniel and I went to the Gordon Parks Foundation in Pleasantville, New York, and there we met director Peter Kuhnhart Jr., who is honoring Parks's legacy by partnering with institutions to create thematic exhibitions on singular moments of Parks's career. So here you'll just see a selection of books that have been published from these exhibitions. The foundation works with institutions to produce a deep dive on one singular essay. So you'll see here Invisible Man, which was done by the Art Institute of Chicago, Gordon Parks' Back to Fort Scott from the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, and many other. Gordon Parks and Muhammad Ali was done at the Nelson Adkins Museum, and we're very proud to join this lineup. When we were there, Kuhnhart mentioned Parks's 1967 essay, Whip of Black Power. And we knew immediately that it was the only essay that we wanted to do. The images are beautiful, the text is powerful, and the entire subject matter echoes to our present day. Now, once we'd chosen our essay, then the work began. My first glimpse of Parks's unseen 700 images for this essay came in the form of contact sheets like this one. The foundation sent me images of all the contact sheets they had. And so for those of you not familiar with photography, a contact sheet is just a direct print of the entire negative strip, so that you can see everything on the roll of film. And yes, when they sent it to me, it was pretty blurry and shot through Mylar film like this, so it was fun to look at. Now, none of them were dated exactly, none of them were labeled with location, and none of the people in the photos were identified. You can see all that was on the back was Life magazine's strange coding. Parks, on assignment for Life, had merely exposed his rolls of film and then sent them back to Life headquarters, where the darkroom wizards at the magazine processed the film, created the contact sheets for Life's picture editors, and then the editors went through and chose those 5 images for the eventual publication. Now, always on a deadline, the Life staff seems to have moved quickly and perhaps even a little bit sloppily, it seems, because there's something odd about these sheets. And this is a terrible photo, so I apologize, but they're not in the proper order. In other words, they didn't follow the order of Parks's shots in which he took them. And what's more, they didn't even represent one singular roll of film. It was clear that different strips of negatives had been mixed and mingled and produced on one contact sheet. So, for example, take a look at this section. Negatives are always numbered at the bottom, and you'll notice that 1A here appears twice, which means that's 2 different rolls of film. The middle roll starts 1A, 1, 2A, 2, and ends with 6, meaning that 6A should be next. But the strip above actually starts with 7, and then proceeds with a number and then a letter, which meant that all 3 strips of film that you see here were from 3 different rolls of negatives. So to even begin to get a sense of where Parks was shooting, what he saw, and what he emphasized, I had to engage in some arts and crafts, which was cutting apart each image of the negative strips and reuniting it with the others that were actually on the same roll. So here you see my cut and paste job, and you see that same center strip now reunited with the others that it belongs with and in the correct order within its original roll. Now, why does this matter? Well, what emerges is a better understanding of what caught Parks's attention as a photographer. And in this example, it's clearly the mustachioed, bald-headed man who's depicted time and time again at the center of the compositions. Looking at Parks's complete negatives guided my research, and I focused on things that were important to him, important in his images. Now, thankfully, the man that we see here, that is the subject of so many images, was also named in the article, and his name is Ron Karenga. So I arranged a phone call with Dr. Ron Karenga and shared the photos with him, eager to hear his recollections. And here you have them. We went through each photo individually, one by one. He would identify for me any other people that he could recognize in the frame and also tell me exactly what was going on in that moment. It was a long phone call, but very fruitful, as you can imagine. And he not only identified the situation and the people, but also the emotions and the focus of the moment. And with this in hand, and these other names, I started to reach out to everyone else in the photos too. This chain of identification allowed me to title, date, and name the men and women in many of Parks's photos. Now, not everyone remembered each other fondly, but everyone remembered these moments. And with these memories and oral histories running through my mind, and Parks's now reconstructed contact sheets in front of me, I was able to understand more and more of what these images meant within the context of 1966 and 67. Now, take this contact sheet, for example. At first, I could not understand why Gordon Parks had taken photo after photo of Stokely Carmichael driving a car. What on earth did he want to emphasize? Sadly, I couldn't ask Parks or Carmichael as they've passed, so I asked those friends and family members who had taken car trips with Carmichael what they thought when they saw these images. Now, when I spoke with Carmichael's son, Bokar, he told me that some of his fondest memories of his father were taking long car rides, really going nowhere, just getting in the car and driving, and singing at the top of their lungs. It was a sense of freedom and joy that he said he will never forget. And I think that is well represented in many of these photos. And it wasn't the first time I had heard about singing and music. Many of the people I spoke with mentioned how important music was to the movement in general and to Carmichael in particular. It was a love that Parks even wrote about in the essay, that music kept him grounded. And I'm happy to say, and I see our own DJ Flash Gordon Parks in the audience, that to honor that love of music, we have a Spotify playlist going on with the exhibition, so I hope you check that out. But it was when I spoke with Terry Cannon, who was editor of the Movement newspaper in San Francisco, California, and you see him seated at the top end of the table in this image. He's the kind of slumped over guy with those big, thick framed glasses at the top right. That I started to fully understand why Parks found it so important to depict Carmichael behind the wheel of the car. According to Cannon, who had taken many car trips with Carmichael across the South, SNCC drivers were trained in defensive maneuvers to protect them against the violence and interference of those who would do them harm. They had to learn how to pop their e-brake to make sudden U-turns. They had to learn how to evade a chase. They had to know what to do in case they faced gunfire. A SNCC driver was always aware that they were taking responsibility for the lives of those in the car. So suddenly, Parks' vision of Carmichael behind the wheel was entirely clear to me. Parks shows Carmichael balancing these traits, his deep responsibility for others, and his ability to find joy even in the most tense situations. So, as you might now realize, when I found a contact sheet with many similar images in a row, I knew to pay close attention. And one of the reasons is Parks is an amazing photographer, everyone. He would normally get the shot he was seeking in 1 frame or 2 frames, or sometimes 3. But if he's giving you 15 frames of some situation, it's clear you want to pay attention. Now, local Houstonian and former Life magazine photographer Bob Gomel confirmed my hunch on this one. He told me that life photographers lived by one golden rule, and that was, if you didn't want to see it in print, don't shoot it. After all, once life photographers had exposed their film and shipped it back to Life headquarters, they had no control over what would be printed in the magazine. Well, I chatted with Bob about this, and I realized that the opposite might also be true. If you did want to see it in print, shoot it a lot. So why did Gordon Parks want to see one of these images in print? What was it about this moody setting? The figure at daybreak, the temperamental skies? Well, the answer came from Parks himself, who noted that W. Eugene Smith's Country Doctor was one of his favorite essays of all time. Published in Life magazine in 1948, before Parks was on staff, the photographer remembered how he studied it. Remember, as a railroad porter, he would pick up those magazines and bring them home and try and figure out the keys to great photography. Well, this was his favorite. He really wanted to know how you could articulate someone's full character in a single image. Now, this essay remained a classic for decades. And that opening shot from Country Doctor certainly looks familiar here. Parks is quoting W. Eugene Smith's image. Now, remember that Parks is a certified celebrity at this point. He really is. He has made his reputation as one of the greatest photographic artists in the world, and he doesn't need to quote someone else's work. So why do it? Well, Country Doctor was all about Dr. Sirianni, a selfless advocate for his community, who could be called on anytime, day or night, to go out and work on behalf of his fellow man. So as Parks borrows this imagery, he's also borrowing that characterization. He wants you to see Carmichael in the same way, as a tireless advocate for his community. Now, it's interesting to note that when I would share the photos with those men and women captured in them, they all had a very similar reaction. Each one of them remembered the scene. They remembered that meeting or that lecture. They remembered what was being discussed and how they felt. They really had perfect recall for pretty much everything within the frame. The sons of Watts, who are standing in the back here, I spoke with some of them. They could tell me exactly what was being argued about in this moment at the Black Congress. But what was interesting is that they were all shocked to see the photographs. Not a single person I talked to remembered Gordon Parks ever being in the room. Now, again, Parks is a certified celebrity. He loves that big bushy mustache that he has because it makes him very recognizable. But when he was on assignment, he truly became a fly on the wall in order to get the most truthful images possible. And yes, even speaking to these ladies, they did not ever notice Gordon Parks probably 3 feet in front of them taking their photo. Parks's photos instead are pure reflections of the moment and documented with his singular artistry. They put us exactly in the moment of capture, letting us be there at the scene, sitting in the audience, watching Carmichael lecture, and somehow still capturing him in unbelievably beautiful light, despite the fact that this is a high school gymnasium. The men and women I spoke to also told me about Carmichael. And they told me more than anything else about his irrepressible sense of humor. Now, when we think about Stokely Carmichael, that is not necessarily the first thing we think of. A sense of humor, a jokester, someone always making the moment light. But that's what everyone remembered about him most. And it's an aspect Parks also writes about in his essay and frequently captured in his images. Here you see Carmichael about to get his photo taken. It's a makeshift photo studio at a pool hall. So if you look at the bottom left corner of all those photos, you see the corner of a pool table there. You see it? Yeah. He's the newly elected chairman of SNCC. He needs a headshot. So they've set up this photo studio, and they're inviting Cleveland Sellers in to take a photo with him. Cleveland was the secretary of SNCC under Carmichael. And, the photographer doesn't want them sitting at the same level. They're about the same height. So in order to make Cleveland a little taller, they've put books down on the seat. Can you see it at that first image? And the boys find this hilarious. It's like putting a little kid in a booster seat, and they just joke around about it for the rest of the series of images. And so, as Parks emphasized Carmichael's engaging personality and his sense of fun in many of the photographs, and even describes in the essay, quote, the irrepressible humor that helps him keep his balance, it became evident that I needed to have as many photos as were appropriate of that exact moment of Carmichael laughing and having fun. The other thing I learned about him is that Stokely Carmichael would always find the children in the room. Either before or after his lectures, he would seek out the youngest audience members and chat with them about their dreams and aspirations, and even ask them to critique his lectures. He really enjoyed engaging with the next generation like that. And of course, then Parks had also photographed those things. So as I heard from people and heard about aspects of his personality, I could always turn back to the images, and Parks had always noticed that too and captured it in some way. Now, everyone also emphasized to me how different Carmichael was from the figure of racial violence and division that was portrayed in the popular press. They spoke of Carmichael's patience and of his weariness at times. And similarly, for Whip of Black Power, Parks depicted Carmichael in a holistic and humanizing manner. He was a fiery and passionate and dutiful figure filled with love for his community, and Parks wanted to show all of that. Parks aimed to combat the mass media's one-sided depictions of this civil rights leader by capturing a complex character filled with many emotions. And here at SNCC headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, Parks documented Carmichael in a moment of weary frustration. Now, the 7 frames of photographs that lead up to this one show Parks getting closer and closer to Carmichael as he's slumped over his desk, but what remains the same in each image is how Parks frames the things above him. It's that portrait of Malcolm X. It's the portraits of his Lowndes County friends that remain solid in the images. Parks understood that those were Carmichael's sense of self. It's where he went to regain his strength. He loved Malcolm X, he loved his Lowndes County family, and they inspired him by being on his walls. Carmichael, as Parks tells us, was a man equally comfortable speaking in the living rooms of LA patrons as he was knocking on doors to register voters in Lowndes County. One equally moved by joy and passion, he was a young man with a world of responsibility, but a heart full of hope. And as Parks captured these same emotions, he depicted Carmichael's changeability in other ways, marveling at the young activist's ability to adjust to any environment, and noting how Carmichael changed his manner of dress and speech in order to put his audience at ease. Parks believed implicitly in Carmichael and saw him actually as the new face of the civil rights movement. One of the last places Parks followed Carmichael was the April 15th, 1967 anti-Vietnam War demonstration. Now, I find this comparison fascinating. At the demonstration, Carmichael spoke last after a glittering roster of speakers, including Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Harry Belafonte, Dr. Spock. Now, Parks, as we've learned, can really get the shot no matter what. And it's interesting to see how he captures MLK. He almost seems like a statue of himself. He's very still, upright, hands in his pockets, not moving. In contrast, look at how Parks captures Carmichael. Enthusiastic, moving, gesturing, and with an immense crowd around him. Now, that same crowd was, of course, present as Martin Luther King Jr. was speaking, but Parks crops it out, ignores it, doesn't put it within the photographic frame, because in his mind, we're looking at old ways versus new ways. We're looking at the new direction of the civil rights movement. And as Parks wrote in his first draft of his life essay, Carmichael is on fire. Now, sadly, Carmichael would resign as SNCC's chair just days after Parks would submit his essay. He wanted to go back to community organizing, and he felt that he was a lightning rod for the press, and that the SNCC organization would be better able to move forward if he was out of the spotlight. But that was later, and in these packed and powerful months from the summer of 1966 to the spring of 1967, as Parks followed Carmichael, he marveled at the young man's ability and wanted others, his life readers, to do the same. So the end goal of Gordon Parks' Stokely Carmichael and Black Power is to present an unabridged version of Parks' vision, to really reflect in the exhibition format and the chosen photographs Gordon Parks' efforts at sketching the full character of Stokely Carmichael. So I hope you all go take a look at the exhibition. And just as two closing notes, Andrew mentioned tomorrow's lecture, but I just want to emphasize it one more time. Dr. Jones from Prairie View A&M will be here discussing more of the historical context. I'm excited. It's right here, again at 4 p.m. Or no, 2 p.m. When is it? 2 p.m. I'll be here, don't worry. And of course, I wanted to mention our catalog. The catalog for this show is available. It's actually available right out the door and to the left as you leave. It has every single image in the show in it, along with all the ephemeral material we were able to find. So all of those brochures and pamphlets that are above Carmichael's head in that one photo have been duplicated and are in the catalog, so you can actually see and read them. You can read Parks's first draft of his life essay and final draft. You can read Carmichael's own words, What We Want, in which he articulates the position of Black Power. So I hope you all consider grabbing a catalog, and I'll be standing out there in case you want to chat with me. Thank you so much.